The day the galaxy went quiet. The emergency session of the Galactic Federation had been called for the third time in 2 weeks. Ambassador Zextheri adjusted his ceremonial scales as he entered the great chamber, his reptilian features betraying none of the fear that gripped his twin hearts. Around him, representatives from hundreds of worlds whispered in languages that spanned octaves humans couldn't even hear. The reason for their terror had a simple name: the silence. It had started 3 months ago in the Outer Rim, in a system so remote that most civilizations didn't even have it cataloged. One day, the system was there: 3 inhabited worlds, 2 space stations, and a thriving mining operation. The next day, it was gone. Not destroyed, not conquered, simply absent. Where planets and stars should have been, there was nothing. Not darkness, not empty space, but a void so complete that sensors couldn't even detect it. The Keth Aran report is confirmed, announced Prime Speaker Velgoth, her crystalline form refracting the chamber's lights into rainbow patterns. The silence has consumed the hegemony's most advanced military outpost. 17 billion souls, gone in 72 hours. A collective shudder ran through the assembly. The Keth Aran Empire was considered the technological apex of the galaxy. Their ships could fold space like origami, their weapons could crack moons, and their artificial minds could predict enemy movements across multiple dimensions. If they couldn't stop the silence, what hope did anyone else have? Zextheri watched as Prime Mind Keth Ol projected itself into the chamber. The surviving eyes form flickered and sparked, a sign of the trauma it had endured watching its entire civilization vanish. "We tried everything." Kethel's synthesized voice carried harmonics of grief that most species couldn't perceive. Quantum torpedoes, reality anchors, temporal displacement fields. The silence consumed them all. It doesn't destroy. It simply makes things cease to exist, as if they never were. "Have we attempted diplomatic contact?" asked Senator Thrix, his gaseous form swirling with anxious colors. "You cannot negotiate with nothing," Kethel replied. "The silence doesn't communicate. It doesn't acknowledge. It simply spreads, system by system, leaving perfect emptiness in its wake." Zextheri's aide leaned close to whisper in his ear Finn. "Sir, the projection models are complete. At current expansion rate, the silence will reach the core worlds within 6 standard months. 6 months. The heart of galactic civilization had 6 months before it simply stopped existing. What of the architects? Someone called out. Surely their reality-shaping capabilities. The architect's homeworld was consumed yesterday. Prime Speaker Velgoth announced, her crystalline form dimming. Their entire pocket dimension collapsed into nothingness. The chamber fell into horrified silence. The architects were beings of pure thought who lived in constructed realities. They had existed since the galaxy was young, shepherding the development of countless species. If even they couldn't escape the silence. "There must be something," Senator Thrix insisted, his gaseous form pulsing with desperate energy. "Some weapon, some technology, some solution we haven't considered." "We've consulted every advanced civilization," Velgoth replied. "The Altarian collective's hive mind cannot comprehend it. The Voidwalkers cannot phase around it. Even the Time Weaver's temporal manipulation fails against it. The silence exists outside conventional physics." That's when Captain Elena Rodriguez cleared her throat. The human military liaison had been sitting quietly in the observer section, as humans typically did during Federation assemblies. Most species barely acknowledged their presence. Humans were newcomers. After all, barely 2 centuries into galactic civilization. They had no reality-shaping technology, no collective consciousness, no ability to manipulate time or space on a cosmic scale. "Excuse me," Captain Rodriguez said, standing up. Her voice carried clearly despite the chamber size. "Has anyone actually asked us for help?" A ripple of what might charitably be called amusement passed through the assembly. Zextheri felt his translator struggling with some of the responses, Several species didn't have concepts for the type of condescension being expressed. Captain Rodriguez, Prime Speaker Veligoth's tone was diplomatic but strained. We appreciate your species' enthusiasm, but this situation requires more advanced solutions. More advanced than what? Rodriguez asked. You've told us what doesn't work. Have you tried asking what might? Human technology is primitive compared to what has already failed, Kethel interjected. Your weapons are chemical-based. Your ships require physical fuel. Your computational systems are binary. What could you possibly offer that civilizations millions of years older haven't already attempted? Rodriguez smiled, and Zextheri found himself suddenly uneasy. He'd been Earth's liaison for 12 years, and he'd learned to recognize that particular human expression. It usually preceded something that would make him file very long, very complicated reports. You'd be surprised, Rodriguez said simply. But fine. Don't ask. Just, when this reaches the core worlds, remember that you chose not to. She sat back down, and the assembly moved on to other desperate measures. Emergency evacuation protocols were discussed. Resource allocation for refugee fleets was debated. Plans for preserving galactic civilization in hidden enclaves were proposed and discarded. But the silence continued to spread. 2 weeks later, when the Hegemony Coalition's fortress worlds had been consumed and panic was spreading across the galaxy, Zextheri found himself standing in a small office on Luna, humanity's moon base. The room was cluttered with strange devices, holographic displays showing incomprehensible equations, and what appeared to be a half-eaten sandwich. Behind the desk sat Dr. Sarah Chen, a human terraforming engineer who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. She was middle-aged by human standards, with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and clothes that suggested she'd been working for days without sleep. Ambassador, she said without looking up from her calculations, I assume you're here about the silence. Dr. Chen. Zextheri began formally, his diplomatic training kicking in despite his desperation. The Federation Council has authorized me to make an official request for human assistance in dealing with the current crisis. Chen finally looked up. Her brown eyes held the kind of weariness that came from watching civilizations fall. Officially, huh? That's nice. 2 weeks ago, you told us to sit quietly while the adults handled things. The situation has evolved. Has it? Chen leaned back in her chair. Let me guess. The silence consumed something else important, and now you're willing to consider that maybe, just maybe, the primitive humans might have an idea worth hearing. Zextheri's scales shifted color, a sign of embarrassment among his people. Dr. Chen, I must emphasize the urgency of the situation. 17 systems have been consumed. Billions of beings have simply ceased to exist. The Federation's most advanced species are fleeing the affected regions. I know, Chen said quietly. I've been tracking it since it started. Then you understand why we need your help. Chen was quiet for a long moment, studying the data streams flowing across her displays. Finally, she spoke. You know what I do for a living, Ambassador. You're a terraforming engineer. You modify planetary environments to support life. Close. I solve impossible problems. She gestured to her screens. When a planet's ecosystem is so broken that nothing should be able to survive, I figure out how to make it thrive. When atmospheric conditions are so hostile that existing life should die, I find ways to adapt. I specialize in situations where conventional wisdom says there's no solution. And you believe you can solve this. Chen smiled, and like Captain Rodriguez before her, her expression made Zextheri deeply uncomfortable. Ambassador, you've been trying to fight the silence like it's a weapon or a disease. But what if it's not? I don't understand. You will. Chen turned back to her displays and started typing rapidly. Tell the Federation Council that Dr. Sarah Chen of Earth accepts their request for assistance. Also tell them that as of right now, all human civilian and military operations in affected sectors are suspended. Suspended? Why? Chen paused in her typing and looked directly at him. Her voice was calm, matter of fact, and absolutely terrifying. Because when a human says, "Fine, I'll handle it," the smart thing for everyone else to do is get out of the way. Within 6 hours of Chen's acceptance, every human ship in the galaxy began returning to Earth. Trade routes were abandoned. Diplomatic missions were recalled. Human scientists working on joint projects packed up their research and departed without explanation. The evacuation was so swift and thorough that some species initially thought humanity had decided to flee rather than help. But HFY, monitoring the communications from Luna Base, knew better. Humanity wasn't running away. They were clearing the field. What humanity calls handling it. Dr. Sarah Chen hadn't slept in 48 hours, but her eyes were brighter than they'd been in weeks. Around her, Luna Base had transformed into something that made visiting aliens deeply uncomfortable, a hive of activity that seemed chaotic, but moved with the precise coordination of a living organism. "Status report," she called out to her team. "Deep space monitoring stations are online and synchronized," reported Dr. James Park, her chief systems analyst. "We're tracking the Silence's expansion pattern in real time across 17 dimensions. Temporal mapping is complete," added Dr. Maria Santos from her workstation. "The progression isn't random. There's a pattern, but it's operating on timescales our AI systems initially couldn't detect." Chen nodded, her fingers dancing across holographic displays that showed data streams flowing from across the galaxy. To any observer, it looked like humanity had been preparing for this moment for decades. Which, as it turned out, they had. "Dr. Chen," came Captain Rodriguez's voice over the comm. "The Federation is getting nervous. They're asking why human vessels are taking up positions around systems that aren't even threatened yet." "Let them ask," Chen replied. "How's the network status?" "All nodes responding. We have coverage in every sector that's reported silence activity, plus predictive positioning based on your models." HFY, who had remained on Luna Base to observe humanity's response, found himself more confused by the hour. The humans were moving with purpose and coordination that suggested long-term planning. But as far as he knew, they'd only learned about the silence 3 months ago, same as everyone else. "Dr. Chen," he ventured, "may I ask what exactly you've discovered?" She looked up from her work, and for the first time since he'd known her, she seemed genuinely excited. "Ambassador, what do you know about evolution? The biological process by which species adapt to their environments over time. Broader than that, evolution is how any system responds to selective pressure. Organisms evolve. Ecosystems evolve. Civilizations evolve." She gestured to the displays around them. "Even galaxies evolve." "I'm not certain I follow." "The silence isn't destroying anything, Ambassador. It's not a weapon or a plague or some kind of cosmic disaster." Chen's smile was the kind that preceded paradigm shifts. "It's a test." Before HFY could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the base. Dr. Park looked up from his station, his face pale. "The silence just jumped 17 light years in an instant. It's not expanding in a sphere anymore. It's targeting specific systems." "Which ones?" Chen asked, but her tone suggested she already knew. "Every system with a major Federation research installation. Every world with a strategic military base. Every planet that houses advanced civilization archives." Park's voice cracked slightly. "It's going for the heart of galactic civilization." Around the galaxy, panic spread faster than the silence itself. The Federation's most precious worlds were under direct threat, and there was no pattern to predict where it would strike next. Emergency evacuations began as entire populations fled toward the galactic core. But humanity's response was different. "Network activation," Chen announced calmly. "All stations, all ships, all installations. It's time." What happened next would be discussed in galactic history classes for millennia to come, assuming there were still civilizations left to teach them. Hidden installations that had been disguised as simple monitoring stations suddenly revealed themselves as massive computational arrays. Human ships that had appeared to be standard cargo vessels unfolded into structures that defied conventional understanding of physics. Research stations that had been dismissed as primitive began broadcasting signals that resonated across dimensions. "My God," whispered Kethel's voice over the Federation emergency channel. "What are they doing?" The answer came from Dr. Chen herself, broadcasting on all frequencies simultaneously. "This is Dr. Sarah Chen of Earth to all galactic civilizations. The entity you call the Silence has been testing you for readiness. You've all failed the test by trying to fight it. We're about to show you the correct answer." Zextheri watched in amazement as humanity's true capabilities began to unfold. The network they'd activated wasn't just a communication system. It was a galaxy-spanning consciousness that had been quietly observing and learning for 2 centuries. Every human diplomat, every trade mission, every scientific exchange had been gathering data, building understanding, preparing for this moment. "The Silence isn't evil," Chen explained as her team worked around her. "It's a natural phenomenon, a mechanism by which the galaxy periodically resets civilizations that have become stagnant. But it's not mindless. It's looking for something specific." "Which is?" Zextheri asked. "A civilization capable of growth, of adaptation, of thinking beyond the limitations of their own experience." Chen's hands moved across her controls with practiced precision. Every species that faced the Silence tried to stop it, contain it, or flee from it. But you can't fight evolution, Ambassador. You can only participate in it. The network pulsed, and suddenly, the Silence stopped expanding. For the first time in months, the void zones remained stable, neither growing nor consuming new territory. "What did you do?" Kethel's voice carried harmonics of wonder and fear. "We talked to it," Chen said simply. "The Silence isn't destroying civilizations. It's cataloging them, looking for species ready for the next phase of galactic evolution. Every species that tried to fight it proved they weren't ready for advancement. They were trapped in their own limitations." Through the network, Chen transmitted a signal that somehow made the Silence respond. Not with consumption or expansion, but with something that might have been curiosity. "The galaxy is about to change, Ambassador," Chen said to Zextheri. "The Silence was never the threat. Stagnation was. The inability to grow beyond what you already know was. We're about to show the galaxy what happens when you stop trying to protect what you have and start building something better." The Silence began to pulse with patterns that matched humanity's network signals. And slowly, impossibly, the void zones began to transform. Where there had been nothingness, new forms of matter and energy started to emerge, not recreating what had been consumed, but creating something entirely unprecedented. "You see," Chen explained as she watched civilizations across the galaxy witness the birth of something beyond their understanding. "When a human says, 'Fine, I'll handle it,' we don't just solve the immediate problem. We redesign the system so the problem becomes impossible." The Silence wasn't destroying the galaxy. It had been waiting for a species capable of partnership in its true purpose, evolution on a cosmic scale. And humanity, the young species that everyone had underestimated, had just proven they were ready to help guide that transformation. As Zextheri watched the Silence begin to teach rather than consume, transforming threatened worlds into something beyond current understanding, he realized why his species' first contact protocols had warned them to be cautious around humans. They weren't dangerous because they were violent or unpredictable. They were dangerous because they refused to accept that any problem was truly unsolvable. And in a galaxy facing its greatest crisis ever, that made them the most terrifying allies imaginable. The Federation had asked for help stopping the Silence. Instead, humanity had convinced it to evolve the entire galaxy. When humans say, "Fine, I'll handle it," they don't just fix what's broken. They build something better than anyone thought possible. The galaxy was about to learn just how much better that could be.